Hi, this is From Ideology to Unity. So earlier this morning, I watched two videos where the man called Andrew Huberman was speaking. He's a neuroscientist, and the YouTube channel was Be Inspired. I recommend you check out these two videos he did, where he was talking about how our brain is wired, reprogrammed through dopamine and stuff, and how the first hour of the day is really important and how it sort of sets the tone for the rest of the day, not just psychologically, but neurologically, right? And because of the way we get pleasure from dopamine, if you get it without reward, if you get the reward without the actual process, then it ends up, it basically says to your brain that, well, what it does is normally it's a motivator. Dopamine is a motivator. Through the process of doing things, you're motivated to do more things. Wait, is that the way to put it? No, by the process of going through a process of tasks, right? We're motivated to do more of it by dopamine, right? But what happens if we get addicted to a substance, or we have a way of gaining pleasure without any process to get of work or anything like that, to get that, like just a drug or something, right? Or it could be, a YouTube video or something. But you get that hit, and what it does is our association with activity means that we don't, it's actually harder to motivate ourselves because it becomes about the outcome and the reward at the end, not about what you do to get there. And so people find themselves not motivated to actually do anything because they're actually getting it from that source of pleasure. But the thing is, that source of pleasure isn't truly comparable to the sense of fulfillment for getting things done, and the process that you go through, the journey that you go through in doing what you enjoy doing, or what's fulfilling, right? So that's why you might actually, in the long run, feel more unhappy, and it's just almost like scraping the barrel to just get a sort of a sense of pleasure temporarily, but you're not really taking care of yourself. Now, why is this important, and how does it relate to spirituality? Well, I had a sort of, how to put it? A eureka would be an overstatement. But essentially, I realized that attachment to outcome is involved here. And attachment to outcome is something in spirituality that is, I suppose you could say, warned about, where it's in Buddhism as well and stuff like that, where if we're attached to the outcome, then we suffer because we're taken out of presence and we're put into the future. Our mind is in a hypothetical future and not present with us now. We're literally not present with ourselves, because the now is what's real. Instead, we're in the illusion of a hypothetical future. And it becomes about what we could get then, and we'll be happy if we achieve some outcome then that we're attached to getting. Right? What happens if we don't get it the way we want it? Or we don't get it at all? Then we'll suffer. And the neuroscientist actually talked about this as well. He talked about, now, even if it's slightly less enjoyment than you expected in the reward, then it will change the baseline in terms of, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it's like it changes the baseline in terms of what enjoyment we get relative to pain, such that it tilts it more towards suffering, slightly, because that sense of disappointment is there. So it's hard to explain. You just have to see the video to really understand exactly what he's saying. But it's like the baseline for getting reward and dopamine and feeling good is lowered, such that we don't feel as good we don't get as much reward in future, the more we don't get the reward we expect. And so this really seems like a neurological corollary. Okay, no, that's not the word. Basically, corollary. Oh no, I can't pronounce it. Basically, it's like the brain mirrors the mind in a non. The mind is non-physical, but the brain is a sort of hardware that reflects the mind in a physical representation. And this is a hardware that we use in the 3D in our incarnation, at least in our third density incarnation. And so what I realized is, just as the brain and neurology wiring affects us deeply, it's actually a three-dimensional representation or reflection of the real pattern that's occurring in, let's say, a 5-dimensional, in a mental sense, on a higher dimensional sense, in the sense of our mind, in terms of, we are mind, right? And we are in a physical vessel, but that's not what we are. We are the observer, right? And our mind is more what we really are. Okay? The brain is, when our brain is rewired, that's actually a reflection of the mental programming being changed, and it will adjust in alignment to that. So if our mental programming changes, the neurological brain setup will change accordingly. And this is why when a materialist or physicalist, they look at, and the scientists, they study the brain, it looks like to them that it's just the brain wiring determining it all. When in fact, the brain wiring is the result of the mental programming that can be understood in terms of the subconscious programming of the ego. And the ego is a mental thing. So if you know about the Aaron Abke's course and things like Course in Miracles and also Neville Goddard's work, what we learn from that is that the conscious programs, the conscious I am, or the conscious beingness, and the conscious I am that we really experience is when we relax our brain and stop thinking as much, right? That being that we are, when we're the beingness that's in between the thoughts, that is what programs the subconscious. So a lot of today we operate on just the subconscious programming, right? The way Neville Goddard describes it is almost like the conscious impregnates, symbolically, the subconscious, and then the subconscious plays out what is impressioned into it by the conscious, right? And then the subconscious will play along these things. And what I'm adding to this is the idea that the brain will wire itself in according to what the subconscious impressions are that have been put there or impressioned onto it by the conscious. So that's how we rewire our brains, by the indirect. We rewire our brains indirectly by the fact that we program, in inverted commas, or leave an impression on our subconscious. It's almost like, how do I put it? You know, have you ever seen this thing in medieval dramas or whatever, then they've got wax and then they put a stamp on it and it leaves this impression in it? Or like, it's an art as well, this idea of, you've just got a bunch of paint and you put this block on it with a pattern on it, and then you've got that pattern there. It's printing. Printing's like, the old original printing was like that. They've got a big T button thing, or like block, with the word with a T on it, and you've got ink on there, and you go dirt, and then you've got this pattern. Okay, I think you know what I mean by laying an impression down, right? It's essentially like the metaphor of programming does largely fit what it is. Now, so we must be careful about what effect, or at least be aware. I would say it's important to be aware of how we are programming our minds, and by that process, wiring our brains, because that in turn affects our experience. And to reprogram it, we of course need to be present. Now, what happens if you're focused on outcome and giving yourself, first of all, what is pleasure seeking? What is it when you take a pill that makes you feel good, or you have some tasty food, or you watch a video, anything that gives you pleasure without you working for it, right? What it is, why are you doing that to begin with? Because you are attached to the outcome of the pleasure that you get from doing that. And you're doing it to get that outcome, right? But there isn't a process to get there other than a sort of ritual of like, I don't know, Big Mac and crisp and eating them. Or, you know, the basics. In terms of getting that outcome. So, you know, I wish I could put this more concisely from the beginning, but obviously I'm kind of saying it as it comes to me, so I guess it's going to be a bit messier. But that's okay. I mean, you obviously like this. Okay, where was I? Right. So, the pleasure seeking in itself, or getting pleasure, the immediate pleasure, is an attachment to outcome, and on a mental level, and it has neurological effects that give you the reward without the process, which means that you get less and less reward because the reward is less meaningful if you get more of it. And I think the brain is wired that way because on a mental level, we know on really deep down that we're not really working for it. And so we're just, it's to do with the, I just realized what it is. It's to do with the law of equal exchange. The law of exchange, or the law of, it's everything in the universe is balanced, right? You give and take. Everything that's given, everything is balanced. So everything that you're given is, so it's like karma, right? If you help loads of people, it will come back to you positively. If you just take from others, then like stealing from people, this is a very typical example, then negative karma will come to you to balance that out. That's just a law of reality. And if it wasn't that way, it's very important for the sake of the universe that it operates that way. And the consequence is positive, is kind of like karma and stuff like that, right? But it also relates to our relationship with the universe, or reality, or nature, or the creator. However you look at it, our relationship with reality is based on an exchange. Now, if we are attached to an outcome of what we can get for ourselves, and we are giving ourselves something immediately without giving to the universe, if we're receiving without giving first, then what we lose is that we don't get so much in the long run. The reward that we get, it decreases and becomes suffering, more suffering than it is reward, the more we give ourselves the reward without giving anything for that reward. It's like there's a trade going on with reality, right? And you're just ripping them, you're just not giving the universe the value for its money. And so it's like, well, I'm not really going to give you back the value for the money, am I? Because it's just like, it's exchange. And what you're telling the universe effectively by giving yourself pleasure without working for it in any way, or at least without being present and putting yourselves in attachment to outcome, what you're saying is you don't want to be given as much by the universe. You're saying that you're not worthy of receiving bounty from the universe. On one level, you're saying you're not worthy and that you're attached to the outcome. That attachment to the outcome is saying that you're not worthy as it is, and you need to do all these outcomes to be worthy. But on another level, and that of course decreases your abundance, but on another level, it's also, you're saying you don't want to be received as much because you're taking it before it can give it. Because you're taking it, it's not going to give it as much. Right? Which is why giving and receiving are one, but also a lack of giving and a lack of receiving are also one. And because it's all in an equal exchange in reality, ultimately, it has to be that way. I mean, even on the dark path, there's an equal exchange. I mean, they try to find loopholes, but ultimately, you can't avoid the law of exchange. It has its results. The universe has its pound of flesh, I suppose. Although, actually, I'm not sure if that's a good phrase. I know people might misportray that. Oh, I've only got 5% left on my battery. Yeah. Anyway, probably time for lunch soon. So, I hope you... Thank you if you were patient enough to listen to all of this. Because I know, it took time for me to get to the conclusion, I guess. Anyway, so I guess that's more or less what I wanted to say. And without further ado, have a great day and bye for now.